Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. So hello and welcome everyone. Thank you guys for being here. My name is Jahari Matthews and I'm proud to serve on the Women's Fund Board of the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. I am honored to co-chair this event, the forum, with Zulfat Suara, who will be moderating our conversation this evening. This is an annual event, and it is aimed at informing our community about important issues facing women in Middle Tennessee. Past forum topics have included sexual assault, the opioid epidemic, domestic violence, human sex trafficking, hunger, and the sandwich generation. The Women's Fund, if you are not familiar with it, is an endowed fund within the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee with the main goal to support nonprofits serving women and girls. The fund was established in 1994 by a committee of community leaders who wanted to invest in the long-term solutions for transforming the lives of women and girls, therefore improving the well-being of the entire community. Since its inception, the Women's Fund is proud to have awarded $2.5 million in grants to 150 unique organizations addressing the following: the achievement of economic self-sufficiency for women, the prevention of violence against women and girls, and then lastly, the promotion of health, well-being, and talent for women and girls. Can we give that a round of applause? Because that is great. So in addition to granting to nonprofits serving women and girls in Middle Tennessee and hosting the forum, this event that you are attending tonight each fall, the Women's Fund is also the host to the annual Power of the Purse, which is a luncheon, and it's held each spring to gather philanthropic-minded women and friends to raise funds for endowment. Girls Give, the newest initiative of the Women's Fund, is designed to promote multi-generational philanthropy for families seeking to intentionally broaden their impact to support women and girls. As you can see, we're very, very busy at the Women's Fund. But today our focus is the forum. Last year when we began the conversation on refugees, we heard from representatives from Salone Health, Metro Nashville Public Schools, and Catholic Charities, with the conversation focused on Nashville's role in supporting new neighbors. As we continue the discussion this year, we take a deeper dive into the resettlement process and personal experiences. Our goal is to learn more about the Afghan community and understand the perspective and experiences refugees have in Nashville, ultimately building a stronger community for all. On behalf of the Women's Fund, I thank you for joining us, especially for joining us for From Refugee to Nashville Neighbor, What It Takes to Call Our City Home, recognizing that language matters. Your program includes some basic vocabulary on the subject, so if you look inside the programs that are at your table, and also included inside the programs are full bios of our panelists. So to kick us off, it is my honor, my pleasure to introduce Nashville Metro Council Member at Large. She's also the Executive Director of Grants and Contracts at Meharry Medical College and fellow Women's Fund Board member. She's busy, y'all, and she's on top of it. Zulfat Suara. She is going to be our moderator for tonight's discussion. Zulfat, I want to just personally take time to say thank yes. Zulfat, I just want to personally take the time to say thank you for your leadership, but also I'm very honored and excited to be able to co-chair this event with you and really looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for all of your hard work.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks to the Women's Fund, my awesome co-chair. We have an amazing program for you tonight. And at this point, I would like to welcome my panelists to the table. Ms. Sabina Mohyuddin with the American Muslim Advisory Council. Ms. Tessa with JFON. Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors. You use the acronym so many times and then you never could remember what it is. And then I'm going to have Nama to please join us, and Masood. Like Johari said, their bios are in the program. It's an incredible panelist, and you're in for a treat tonight. It is my honor as a Muslim and as an immigrant to be a part of this conversation. I've worked with all of these individuals and know them, spoken to them. I know that they have a lot to share with you. Many of us had to move at some point or the other in our lives, whether it's for school, for a new job, because we got married. There's so many reasons why we move. But I want you to imagine what that feeling is like, going to a new place, especially where you don't know a lot of people. How would you be received? How are you welcome? How do you make friends? And that's what the conversation tonight is all about. Now, that is us moving willingly. Imagine people that had to leave because they do not have a choice. As I was thinking about what to talk to you about tonight, I came across the word that we're all very familiar with. And I came across, thanks Google, a good definition for the word empathy. It says, it's the art of imaginatively stepping into the shoes of another person, understanding their feelings, and using that understanding to guide your actions. So that's what we want to do tonight. We want to imaginatively put ourselves in other people's shoes, hear the story, live it, see what it feels, get to understand their perspective, and I hope at the end of the day, we can use what we gain tonight to guide our action as individual and as a collective. So with that, I want to get started. And I'm going to start with Masood. Can you take us through your journey to Nashville and your story as a refugee?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me on this panel. I'd just like to acknowledge that, we all have a story, and it's our personal truth, and we own it, and each is as unique and beautiful as our DNA. So mine starts in Afghanistan, which is where I was born, in Kabul, Afghanistan. Couple of years before the Russian invasion, and before anyone starts Googling, that would be December of 1979 is when the invasion happened. And so it was a time of conflict, and it only escalated. We stayed put. We stayed put, although our lives, as was the case with many others, was in grave danger, being affiliated with the prior regime, just as is the case right now. But we were hopeful and optimistic that things would turn around, and it didn't. So within a couple of years, we left Afghanistan and went to the neighboring country of Pakistan. Again, hopeful and optimistic that things would soon settle down, and it didn't. And by the way, when we left Afghanistan, that in itself was quite an experience, because we just essentially left with the clothes on our back, and that was it. In the dark of night, siblings and everyone sort of separated just to ensure that we wouldn't draw attention. And so that's how we left, and we were in the neighboring country again, hoping against all odds that things would turn around. And when we saw that it wouldn't, and that's when we decided to immigrate here to the United States as refugees. I came here in January of 1988. My uncle was already here in Nashville, and that's how I ended up here in Nashville, along with the rest of my family. And Nashville's changed a lot. I remember, by the time I started school, it was maybe the last couple of months of 5th grade for me, really the first time that I was in a formal educational setting in really my life. And I remember kids would categorize you in one of three groups. You know, you were either white, African American, or Chinese. And they had a really difficult time putting me in any of those buckets. But I mean, Nashville's grown tremendously, and you know, it's the humanity and the people in the community and the compassion that brings me here to the States tonight.
Thank you, Masood. I want to move to Norma. Norma, you're quite new. You just came in 2021. Do you want to share your journey with us?
Absolutely. In the name of Almighty Allah, good evening, everybody. At first, I want to say that my English is primary. If I did any mistake, please pardon me. My journey it's about 1 year that I am in Nashville. At this 1 year, I learned a lot of things, especially that every immigration or every immigrant have different experience in their life, different way that they come in here. The only thing that I have learned in here that is to every person should stand on by their feet and work hard, and they are responsible for their life. And this is the first thing that I have learned in here. Without supporting, without any supporting of anything, how a woman can improve themselves. The second thing that I have learned in here is that we when we immigrate, we should be ready for everything that is in front of us, and that we should be ready for every kind of situation. But when I come here, it was like a very good place that I come in Nashville, and the people of Nashville were very nice to me as a newcomer refugee. And by the supporting of them, I learned a lot of my English get day by day better. And when I come at the first, I just learn hi, hello, not too much. But now I can speak a little bit, and I can listen to many stories. And as I said, everyone have their different story, different experiences, different difficulties, that when they immigrate from a country, that my country was Afghanistan. As you know better, that the situation of Afghanistan right now is too bad, especially for the woman. But I'm glad that God blessed me and helped me to come here, and at least from here I can support my family. And best experience was that I have learned that a woman or strong. Before I just in a word I can say that the women were strong in a sentence, but now I learned that women are strong, and whenever in every part of the world that they can go, they can improve in yourself. And this was my experience that I want to share, that there is no point that we should stop, and there is nothing that we should say we cannot do that. The only thing that I can say that is there's no point to stop. We can improve in every part of ourselves, in every part of the world that we are. And that was my journey. I don't want to go like in every part of that. It's like my story is maybe I don't want anyone to be sad, but my journey, I say that if we try more, we will find those success in every part of the world that we are. Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nama. What a message. Strong women, women helping women, women supporting women, women always leading and struggling and fighting and doing. Amazing. Thank you for that story.
You are welcome.
So on the other side of the panel, we have individuals representing organizations that provide the support that Norma was talking about. So I want to start with Sabina as the Executive Director of the American Muslim Advisory Council that we call AMAC. Would you share an overview of your organization? And also, would you tell us your story? You look like a refugee too, right? So maybe if you want to share your story.
I
and then
hate to
talk about the
disappoint
work-
you, Zulfat, but I was born and raised in Nashville. So maybe more than in this room, right? They say I'm a unicorn, but I don't know what that means. But anyway, my parents and my mom's here. They came to the U.S. in the '60s, and they came by choice. And they went back briefly to Bangladesh, but they came back to Canada in 1970, and it was too cold. Nashville had the perfect weather. And then they moved to Nashville, and I was born after they moved here. So, it's a very privileged position to choose to come to the U.S. and have the ability and means to come. My late husband's parents, they came after the War of Independence in Bangladesh. They came in 1975, and they didn't come as refugees, but their situation was like refugees. So it was post-war. The economic situation in Bangladesh was very bad. There had been a major cyclone. And they had to escape there and come and start life new here with the family of six children. So, these are struggles that are happening in the communities, my neighbors, about, refugee communities, but also, immigrant communities, reasons why people move, can differ. Growing up in the 70s and 80s, there weren't too many immigrants or refugee communities. There weren't too many Muslims. And so it was, how do you feel like yourself in the school, right? People didn't know what Muslim was. When I think about what the racial categories was, it was white, black, and other. And I was always the other, standing in between, trying to figure out where do I fit in. And because of that experience growing up, I feel very passionate about how do I help other Muslims who are growing up here, who have just moved here, who are starting their lives here, feel that sense of belonging. How do they get to, own their own religious or cultural tradition while embracing the American ideals or culture? So, this is something, it's a push and pull within a lot of these families. And so, I've always been passionate about working within the Muslim community. I have a degree in mechanical engineering, but it never spoke to me as much as advocating for my community. And so I was always working in the community, and then after there's an anti-Sharia bill in 2011, Tennessee State Legislature, we pushed back as a community, Muslim community, pushed back with our allies, and we defeated the bill, but we realized we needed to start an organization that really advocated for our community, that could push back against these types of discrimination. Because we have mosques, but they're worried about the spiritual well-being of the community. And that's how we started American Muslim Advisory Council. And Zulfat was one of our founders, and long time she was our chair. And so that was in 2012. We're 10 years old this year. And 2019, I became the executive director. But the goal, I mean, our mission is to empower the Muslim community. And we realize to do that, we have to be more civically engaged. So getting people out to vote, advocating for our communities. We have to build community. Sometimes there are times we need to speak as a united voice. We need to teach other organizations about how to best serve the Muslim communities, how to understand what our unique needs are, building that equity so that we are seen as a community, and then making sure our narratives are told and that the media is not speaking for us. Others are not speaking for us, but we are speaking for ourselves. And so, getting into this work is I'm always looking for ways to improve the condition, to improve the condition of our community, bring them more resources, because a well-resourced community is one that will thrive. And so that's how early on, and I'll probably talk about it more later, but that's how I kind of got into the Afghan resettlement work, and just trying to think of what does this community need, and how do I already have connections? How can I bring them to the table? How can I make more connections so they're better resources? So that's a little bit better story.
All right, thank you. Tessa, as the Executive Director of the Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, known as JFUN, can you tell us, give an overview of what your organization does? And also, just like Sabina, I would like to know your story as well, because I know, like Zulfat, Tessa doesn't like the Tennessee name, right? Or is it? Tessa, is it from Tennessee? No. I didn't think so. I was just trying to be careful. So if you will tell your journey to Nashville and how that story and that journey impacts the job that you're doing today with our current refugees.
Sure. Like Zulfat said, I'm Tessa, and I apologize if I have to ask what, I'm deaf in one ear, and so I often struggle to hear. But I work at Tennessee Justice for Our Neighbors, and we provide immigration legal services to individuals who are seeking humanitarian relief. So our clients include survivors of domestic violence, trafficking, serious crimes that have taken place in the United States, for individuals who have cooperated with the police and have assisted with the prosecution. We also represent children who've been abused, abandoned, or neglected by a parent, and they often come to us through the foster care system or sometimes referrals through the public school system. We also represent a lot of DACA recipients. We've represented more than 1,800 DACA recipients, and so that's sort of the bulk of our legal representation, but we also educate the community about immigration matters. So we have free classes for individuals. We do talks to different groups like Sunday schools and that type of thing. And we have a Spanish language podcast that helps inform and empower our immigrant neighbors. And in that podcast, we often partner with agencies to be able to help share information. And then we also advocate for immigrant rights. And so in that regard, we try to partner again, because we're stronger when we're together, with other organizations to try and advocate for our neighbors. But the way I came to Nashville, I came here with my husband, who's actually in the room. But he accepted a job, and I came here 17 years ago for 1 year when he had actually it'll be 18 years for a clerkship. But the reason why I do my work is both my parents and all of my grandparents are migrant farm workers. And I grew up being taught that the only way we can get better is to educate and to advocate. My grandfather his father had been killed. He was shot after, he grew up in Mexico, was born in Mexico. His father had been shot during the war. His mother ended up raising him and his younger brother, who was then, they were both toddlers at the time. And just in doing everyday life, she was doing laundry in the river and got cut. In that cut turned into an infection, and then she passed away. And so he ended up coming in a covered wagon, getting snuck into the country to go live with his aunt and her husband. And many years later, he ended up eventually getting a green card. He was an incredibly hard worker. He ended up ultimately, his last job was a custodian in the public school system. And it's because of them that I am here.
And we're glad that you're here. So when Sabina was talking, she mentioned the word immigrant. And I know we're using the word refugee. So there's immigrant, there's refugee, there's parolees, there's all kind of languages and names and distinctions that a layperson may not know. I know we have definition in your program, but we may not have covered all of it. But I think it's always important to know the different groups and what their needs are and how to help them and things like that. So I'm going to start with the two of you. So Sabina, if you guys will talk about the technical differences between all of that, and Tessa specifically, if you can focus on what are the citizenship requirements or details, especially for the Afghan refugees or parolees.
So, yeah, I should have looked at the program to read the, no. So, like I said before, like my parents came as immigrant. And so it's usually a choice somebody makes to move from one country to another. But refugees, it's not a choice. They've had some traumatic or violent situations in their home country. Their life was in danger. And through the normal refugee process, they have to go to, they escape and they go to another country. And that's where you hear about refugee camps that people are in for years on end. But the process is then you apply, I believe with the UN, their services, and they kind of pair you up with a country. You have a series of intense interviews and vetting. And then finally, you get to go to your home country, and and then that's how someone would be placed in the U.S. And they're not just like dropped in the middle of nowhere; they go through a resettlement agency. And so I think so they have certain services that are there for them that are ready. So as a refugee, you would come. You already have a employment authorization document. So you're ready to go to work. You can get your green, I'll let Tessa, yeah. But, and so those are the two distinctions. And then you have asylum seekers, people who come to the border and then they say, I'm here, or they fly in, it doesn't have to be the border, and then they say, I want to seek asylum. And so then they should get a hearing date and they'll apply for asylum. So it matters which way you come in, and I think Tessa can explain that.
Yes, Zulfat, you're completely correct. We do have some definitions of the terms for us to go over today, but essentially an asylee is a refugee. It's just a matter of where they are seeking the assistance, if it's outside the country versus inside the country. But they do have to demonstrate past persecution or well-founded fear of future persecution on account of their race, religion, nationality, membership in a social group, or their political opinion. And for this particular, for the Afghans who've come, a lot of them, in order to do so in their representation, when they file their application, they have to include country condition reports, and they have to demonstrate, like, whether their religion is part of what makes them fearful. For the women, a lot of times just being a woman is a danger for them. And so that is sort of and they also have to demonstrate, like Sabina said, they're very well vetted. They cannot have committed any crimes. In their asylum interviews, they are asked if they have ever contributed in any way, in any financial way to the Taliban and supported them in any way. And that's part of their application process, and then it's checked again when they're meeting with them. And so that's kind of one unique thing with this particular group. But generally, a migrant is somebody who, or an immigrant is somebody who has moved to the United States with the intention of living here. And that's sort of the broad definition. And then we have a migrant who is somebody who might be moving around for seasonal work. Like I mentioned, my grandparents and my parents, it might be within the states, or it might be going from, sometimes we have folks who are going down to South America, and then they migrate up for seasonal work, that type of thing.
Thank you. Masood and Norma, would you describe briefly what your experiences were when you first came in, culturally, as well as interacting with some of these organizations?
Been on Zoom calls all day long. Apologize for the dry throat. When we first came in, Nashville was considerably different, as I mentioned, and of course, being a younger child, it just is a lot easier to adapt to a new environment, but it was difficult. It was a new world, especially for my, for our parents who left their jobs and in a new world started washing dishes or do whatever you can to sort of survive, initially with the intent and hopes and dreams that perhaps future generations and kids and their kids can perhaps, embrace the opportunities that are available here and do something more and better with their lives. And we knew that education was key, and our parents really pushed that upon us. And fortunately, we had the opportunity to go down that road. Again, being younger was a little easier for me. I recall my oldest sister, who was, just has always been my role model. She worked at Kroger's. I mean, she was she had finished 6th or 7th grade in Afghanistan, but when she came here, she during the day she would bag groceries and walk to Kroger's, and we lived in East Nashville, and come back and go to find her way. When she got enough money, got a license, got a car, started going to night school to get her GED, because she was determined to go to college, although, my dad wasn't here at the time. So she was both supporting the family and also advancing her goals. And as Norma mentioned, she knew the opportunities that were available here, and she wasn't going to let it go to waste. But the resources that are available now, the organizations that are here, perhaps some of them were around, but certainly we were unaware. We weren't as connected. The city itself just wasn't. I went to Cameron Middle School because that is the only school that at a middle school level that offered English as a second language. So we were bused, and I remember 45 minutes each way. On a good day, in Hillsborough, right around the corner, I believe was one of maybe 2 schools that offered ESL classes for at the high school level. So, a lot's changed, and having gone through that process, going back to the empathy word, I've experienced a version of it, and I know what it's like. And so when I heard and first that we were expecting a good number of Afghans to relocate here, the community really wanted to make sure that we did whatever we could to ensure that their transition would be as smooth as possible.
Thank you. Yes, your experience.
My experience during the 1 year when I left, it's hard for, especially for a woman, but for an Afghan woman to leave her country and alone without any, like, I have never separated from my family before. This was the first flight, first trip, that first time that I go outside of my country. This was like a painful experience for me to separate from my family. After, like, when I come to the Nashville, to live alone and like finding a job and learning the language and everything, like when I now during this 1 year that I have learned, especially the basic was the language as a second language that I have to learn that. And also working, my job was in a like security job, but when I come, because of the I had a bachelor in medical tech, like medical technologist, but I am working as a phlebotomist in TriStar Southern Health Hospital to find a job to to like to face with the new people, new language, new culture, new communities. It was like, at the first it was very hard for me, but day by day, with the supporting of like those agencies that they were working for us, and they were holding like classes, those things, they helped me. And it was like at the first it was very hard experience for me, but now I can say that it's a very good experience for me, that I enduring this 1 year. I learned a lot of things. I learned a lot of things about the culture of America, and also about the languages, about the people, and also about the communities, how to improve ourselves in a new society.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
So, thank you all for that. I find a quote by Dr. King that says that people fail to get along because they fear each other, and they fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they have not communicated with each other. People use the fear of immigrants and refugees to divide us. It's often good for political pundits and people that want something to gain out of it to be able to throw that divisiveness between us. And so with that, I wanted to talk about what are some of the misconceptions that people have about immigrants and refugees. I'll start with Nama. What is it that, in your experience, people do not understand about refugee? Like, based on your interaction, the people that you've met, is there something that you think, oh, no, that's wrong, that's not right about refugee? Or is there anything in your experience that you can speak to? And then for Masood, what I wanted to talk about specifically is, what are the contributions? You've been here for a long time. Can you speak to the contributions of the refugee community? And then I'll come back to our agency after that. Number first.
I'm sorry, because
So, what is your, when you meet people, you've been here about a year, you have a job, you have neighbors, you meet people every day. What is it that you think people got wrong that they don't know about you, that you can tell them? Like, I'm a refugee, but what do you think you want people to understand about you as a refugee? Is there any, if you think your neighbors, your work, everybody understand, fine. Whoa, that would be great. That's part of the learning. But what is it in your own experience in this short time that you can say, I want people to know this about Afghan refugees?
the first point that I want to say that is that that when I come in this in 1 year, the behavior of people was very nice, and it was very good. But the second things that I can say that they should know about us is that they they like they can know by the agency or those place that they are working. And also the only thing that I'm very glad for that they, as a refugee, they respect us a lot.
Thank you.
The only experience that I have, because I can, maybe I can say in my language, but I can explain it in English, because I said my English is not too good.
Monsieur, do you want to interpret for us? You want to, what is it she wants to say? Say it.
أعتقد يعني بس فتيك معجرة مميل يعني سر يعني بهما بانتايم يعني متوجه باشن که درس باشه همه چیز باشه يعني بنا بعضی فقط اینی که ما تا حالا متوجه نشدیم، اما ما تا جایی که دیدیم بسیار روی مردم خوب بوده و احترام کردن بس خود یکی رفیوجی یا تا در جای کار ما بسیار احترام میکنم. وقتی که من میگم که من میرم، یعنی من کارای ایمیگریشن دارم یا چی دارم، بسیار احترام میکنم. ما تا حالا زیاد موضوع رو متوجه نشدیم، یعنی ندیدیم.
She's saying while others may have experienced it and perhaps it's a matter of time, but she hasn't personally come across that in, with her neighbors, just because her situation is pretty confined between where she lives and where she works. So in those two settings, she hasn't experienced it.
That's good. And thank you all for your patience. The reason why I wanted to make sure she said it in her own words, we're here to help refugees become neighbors, and we cannot make up that for them, and we cannot assume we know everything. So I wanted in her own words to be able to give us that. So I appreciate it, and thank you for your English is good, my dear. All right, Masood, what I wanted to talk about is that, and I can speak to this as an immigrant, is that oftentimes people think that refugees and immigrants are staying on society. They just come and take our jobs and our money, and they don't do anything and all of that stuff. Can you, as someone who's been here and who has that experience, can you talk briefly about the contributions of refugees in particular to our country?
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, we were all, or at least our parents, we're all immigrants at some point when it comes to this nation. I mean, it was found by immigrants, built by immigrants, and sustained and by immigrants. But I think it's important to know some of the reasons why people come here. Some by choice, as Sabina mentioned, but a great number of people out of necessity. It is not an easy thing to do. I mean, we all love, the holidays are around the corner. People are going to go and visit different places. We take vacations, whether you go to Florida, whether you go to Hawaii. It could be the dream destination, places that you wanted to go all along. But it doesn't take long before you long for home, because that's where you belong. You want to be with your wolf pack, because once you're separated, you're damaged goods. I mean, who wants to leave that, right? I mean, we all love visiting places, but at the end of the day, we want to be where we belong, and that's home. So when people leave, it's a difficult choice. It's a difficult choice, leaving everything behind. When we left, I don't have anything. I don't have anything of my childhood. It's all just one big blur for me. Couple of months ago, I was just going through some things, and ironically, there was this box. It had some things in it, knickknacks, and in it was like a 3x4-inch black and white photo. And in that, I was, 2 years old, maybe. That is all I have. And when I saw that, when I found that, I don't know, I must have stared at it for 30 minutes or more. It is, by far the most valuable thing. I don't even know how it survived. I don't even know how it got there. But my point is that it's not an easy decision. People don't want to come. We wanted to stay there, but the situation and necessitated that, you know, we, out of the safety for us, our parents elected to come this way. And so when we came here, needless to say, we want to contribute to you know, enhance our own lives, that of our community, and that of the country that we're in. We're part of the fabric, whether some accept it or want it or not. It doesn't change the fact that we're part of the fabric. And it's a quilt. It's a quilt of all varieties, of all backgrounds, and everyone wants to contribute and participate in their own way. You know, the immigrant community, whether it's Afghan or other immigrant community, they're all alike. They've all contributed. And even in our very small community here, relatively speaking, we've got, you know, small business owners, we've got, you know, attorneys, we've got physicians, engineers, other professionals. And with each generation, the expectation grows, because as an immigrant, you understand, you value that opportunity. You understand how privileged you are, that you were one of the select, one of the chosen ones who got to come here and you know, be part of the fabric and be in a position where you can make a difference. I tell, you know, I've got 5 kids, oldest is a junior in high school. I tell him every day, I remind him of how privileged he is and what the expectations are for him in terms of really building on top of, you know, what my parents have done and the sacrifices that have been made, going from, you know, the professional jobs and the careers and everything that we had in Afghanistan to coming and washing dishes and just starting completely over in a completely different environment. So I think it's important to note that when people come here, the vast majority of them, it is to contribute, to live a better life and to contribute to society. And everyone's done it for the, you know, for the most case. And it is that common, you know, thing that bonds us all as humans, the humanity. And it's right. I mean, at the end of the day, what we all want is a better life, a better future for our kids.
Thank you. So we still have a whole lot of questions, and I want to get to all these questions. So I'm going to ask you all to start being brief in your responses so we can get a lot, we can cover a lot. So I'm going to go to Sabina. I want you especially to talk about some of those preconceived notions. And then I want Tessa, if you can talk about the rights of refugees from a legal standpoint. If you two can speak to those two briefly, and then we'll go to our next questions.
So, I mean, I think some of the things Masood covered, just in terms of sometimes the perception and how immigrants and refugees are used during political campaigns by politicians and trying to divide us and create this fear that we have limited resources and we don't want to so-called waste it on somebody who's not American enough. And that is not the ideals of what this country was built on. So, you know, for a lot of immigrants coming in, some of the, you know, ideas we have is they're coming from quote unquote third world. So they're in desperate need of being saved. And so when you come with that attitude, you can lose the respect of that person and who they are. And what you'll find, you see in Norma and other refugees, people who are highly educated, people who have degrees from back home. They had really, you know, good positions. They come here and they have to start at the bottom. And that's where they know they have to succeed for themselves, for their families. A lot of them have families back home. They're not only supporting themselves and their children here, they're all sending part of their earnings back home to support family back home that is in need. So incredibly hardworking, willing to do things, but there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of trauma that, you know, being a refugee coming in, and especially with this new group of Afghans that have come in the last year, I think we all saw the news of people literally hanging off of planes trying to leave. When I mentioned the refugee process is normally like a 3-year process at least. People are, you know, they leave their home country, they're in another country before they're resettled to their final destination. The ones that came a year ago, you know, that left Afghanistan a year ago, that was overnight. Overnight, they lost everything. And so there was a lot of trauma with that. And so, you know, I've heard working with resettlement agency, yeah, we're working with this client, and they're just behaving in a weird way. You know, we're having trouble. That's the trauma. And understanding that, so when you're helping someone, you might be thinking, hey, this is, you know, this is what they need, because that comes from your own life experience. It's not necessarily what they need. And being respectful of the person you're working with, the respect of their culture, respectful of their religion, respectful of their life experiences, and that don't use your own understanding, but take the time to understand it from their viewpoint.
Yes, so you asked me to talk about some of the rights that folks have. So as you see in the brochure, there are a lot of different groups. And so one of the things that happens is asylum seekers and asylees and refugees are kind of the luckiest group of immigrants that come, in the sense that they will often have a case manager when they come with a resettlement agency who helps them with seeking employment, accessing their cash benefits, maybe getting some assistance for rent. Will initially have like 90 days of case management, and that's very intensive, helps them find housing, helps them get enrolled in schools, that type of thing. But then they have a longer time where they're transferred into sort of like the stability stage of things. With the Afghan evacuees who came to us, they actually were in neither of the categories when they came. Most of them, there were 88,000 people who came to the United States at the time, and most of them were fall into what's called humanitarian parole. And that is when our administration has the ability to enact in an emergency situation when there's not enough time to actually go through the process of becoming a refugee. They get a 2-year, in some cases it's one, it just depends on the particular circumstance and what they decide to do at the time. In this case, there was a 2-year parole process for folks, and allowed them to get their work authorization immediately. That's not true for all asylum seekers. Some asylum seekers have to wait about 6 months before they can apply for their work authorization. During the previous administration, they had to wait at least a year to get their work authorization. And under normal circumstances, humanitarian parole those parolees do not get to work with resettlement agencies and get the cash benefits and get the rental assistance. There was an extension of rights in this instance. And the other part to keep in mind is most of the time when you come to the United States, if you are seeking asylum, you have to do so within 1 year of arrival. So a lot of these folks came in August, and then they were referred to our office for an intake and evaluation to determine whether or not they were eligible to file for asylum. Because if you make any fraudulent claims on your asylum application, you are then at risk of not having any immigration accessible to you going forward. So then you're looking at automatic deportation at that point. So it was, folks started getting referred to us in January the clock had already been ticking for several months for them. And there was a urgency at the time. We were still under the impression, although there was talk, that there may be an extension for a second year. So if you didn't make the 1 year deadline, you would be okay. That didn't actually come into play until the 11th hour. And so thankfully there were several folks who were able to file, but the majority of folks have not been able to file nationwide. And in order to go through this process, in order to achieve their economic stability, and Sabina talked about people being traumatized. Imagine being traumatized, not knowing the legal system and not knowing the language and trying to fill out these reports. I mean, when the asylum applications go in, there are large FedEx box for each application. And I can't imagine like my 17-year-old child trying to do this. Like, I can't imagine it.
Wow. All right. I don't want you guys to feel like it's all down. All right. We're going to get to where you can do something and okay, it's not all down. It's going to be bubbly and nice. But before we leave the misconception, I wanted to share something. I think Nama is having a good experience. I had a different one. I came by choice. But my husband was actually invited by the US government to the US. He was a researcher in Africa. He was doing some maternal immunization. Somebody from NIH came, saw what he was doing, and they wanted him to replicate that research here. Prior to that, I don't know what America is. I wasn't planning to move, but I love my husband too much, and so I came with him. And so I've been following him everywhere ever since. Anybody that knows me knows that I have 5 kids, and all 5 kids were born in different places. And so the 5th child that was born in Tennessee, that was my last move because I'm not having another child. But the interesting thing when I first got here was I remember here in Nashville, I took my kids, they were playing baseball. I was working with KPMG at the time. It was in the summer, baseball is in the summer. I'm wearing all of this, I'm tired, I'm sitting down. I don't know anything about baseball, by the way. I understand football, soccer, everything else, but not baseball, other than 3 strikes, you're out. So I'm sitting down there, the boys were playing, I'm tired, it's the end of the day, I don't want to talk to anybody, I'm sitting on the bench, and this lady sat next to me, and she kept shaking her head. I'm thinking, what's going on? And she just kept signing. What's going on? So I'm just there, I'm so tired. And at some point she was like, I don't know how they could do that. How could they make them do that? So at some point I was like, okay, are you okay? So she said, yeah, they make them cover and I'm like, who do what? He said, well, she read something, and I'm thinking, what did you read? Apparently looking at me, sitting down there tired, looking like I don't know how to speak English, nothing. She just automatically assumed that somebody forced me to come here and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I looked at her, I'm like, ma'am, what gave you that impression? She said, well, that was what she read. I said, no, don't believe everything that you read. I'm sitting here because I want to. I brought my kids. And I'm dressed like this because I want to. Nobody made me do anything. And so I wanted to make sure that I find that out. Another thing that I see also is because especially for women from Islamic countries, we automatically assume it's the religion that is oppressing women. And we go to that far right. I cannot leave this conversation without saying that the problem of women is men, not religion. Not religion. In Tennessee, we have a high death rate due to domestic violence. The people that are abusing women are men. The people that are trafficking women are men. The people that are doing this stuff are men. And I love men. My husband is a man. So don't get it wrong. Okay? But it's not a religion. It's the interpretation and the people that to greed and power to oppress these women. That's what is happening in Afghanistan. That is not what Islam teaches. Islam is what encouraged me to be a CPA, that says that I can pick up a mic and speak in front of anybody, any day, anytime. That's my religion that did that. So we need to debunk those, and it's very important for me to say that, especially in this type of setting. So I'm sorry, I promised I was not going to be the moderator that speaks a lot. So let me get back to my job as a moderator now. So where do we go from here? It's been, thank you. We're 1 year away from the first Afghans coming in this last wave. So what do you see as the next thing that we ought to do? How can people plug in? And I'll start with Sabina. I want you to talk about the coalition that was established. How did that come about? What are some of the challenges that you've faced or seen? And then Tessa, I want you to specifically into, look, we've been giving information out all day. How can people plug in? What else can they do? What else do we need to be doing? Currently, in the next year, in the next 3 years, in the next 5 years, let's live with what can we do? So if you both will address that for me.
So the coalition is very interesting. So last September, so after the news of everyone escaping Afghanistan was coming out, and we knew that there was going to be thousands of Afghans resettled in America, we never thought Nashville would be the destination of choice. There are large Afghan communities out in California and Virginia, but Nashville, sorry, Masood, but and so there was a resettlement agency, not even based in Nashville, that reached out to me and asked, well, where do Afghans live? And I was like, well, that's a good question. And so I reached out to the Nashville Afghan Association, Masood, and a few others. And suddenly, our eyes were wide open. We were like, okay, are we expecting Afghans here? Should we be ready? And they were very interested in making sure that they could be the ones welcoming this new group of refugees, because they knew the language, knew the culture. These were their brothers and sisters. So then that's how I connected with the resettlement agencies, which with one of them, I already had that relationship with. So we got on some Zoom calls, and then Zulfat calls me and says, well, United Way reached out and wanted to see how they can help. And so then we started with Zulfat leading it, a coalition. We brought in the resettlement agencies, Nashville Afghan Association, United Way, brought Metro Action Commission to think about how do we help this new group of refugees. And you might wonder, like, well, why now? Why with the Afghans? Why not? And I asked myself the question, like, there were Syrian refugees a few years before that. AMAC wasn't in a place to help. Why now in this situation? I think we all saw it in the news. And then their status as parolee. Initially, they weren't going to get the funding needed to get on their feet. That was changed by the end of September. So we realized there was a financial need. And 4 years of Trump, the resettlement agency, the whole system had to cut back. All the resettlement agencies were just kind of working at their bare minimum. And so they had a lot of catching up to do. They were definitely understaffed. And having this group meet together was very powerful, because we were able to say, okay, wait, this is not working. We heard this. How are you addressing that? Who can we bring in to help with this work? And so, and from last January, we were having these meetings every 2 weeks, and we were being very specific in terms of, there's a housing crisis. They're not finding, there's some of the families were quite large, and they could only find Airbnbs. Imagine Airbnbs and Airbnb prices, and they could only house them there. So, what kind of, what are the issues? Housing, transportation. Nashville's horrible with public transportation, no other way to put it. With the schools. Yeah, I'll call my counselor, but and so just identifying these problems, bringing in the partners to talk about, hey, how can you help solve this issue? How do we make the connections? And so now we've transitioned. Now we call it the Welcoming Nashville Coalition, and we meet once a month. Actually, our next meeting is tomorrow, but we meet once a month to keep up, because we know there's, that first year is critical, but second, third, fourth year is still very important. And I wanted to mention, and I hope I'm not taking too much time, but I wanted to mention, because we had this coalition in place, we saw that there were issues. So there were well-meaning people wanting to help out, but they weren't going through the right avenues, or they were duplicating things that were already being done by resettlement agencies. And it was causing problems. And because of these problems, it was harming some of the Afghan refugees. So us being able to come and sit down, say, hey, this is a problem, we need to resolve it. We need to know where the boundaries are. We need as much help as possible with helping these families. But understanding who's doing what and what services are already out there, and leveraging what's already out there is very important. And so I think it's been such a journey learning about the wonderful people, the wonderful nonprofits that we've been working with Tessa and Community Resource Center. I mean, I can go on and on naming all of them. And working with the Afghan community, bringing the right people in place who really understand the people who've come, their needs, their culture, and realizing they had a certain trust within the community that no matter what I did, I wouldn't have that level of trust and respecting that. So I think I covered all the questions.
I believe you did.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to pause for a minute and just echo what Sabina was saying about the coalition. We were brought in January, and it has been amazing. It has been one of the most rewarding experiences as a not-for-profit to be able to sit down out on our Zoom calls on a regular basis and brainstorm with each other and listen to each other and make sure that, we're all it helps us stay within our mission. Preventing mission drift, which everybody knew was happening during COVID. But it also helped us forge our relationships. Sabina and I work in Casa Azafran together, but now it's like we text each other, and that didn't happen before this. Our organization historically had been serving the Latino population for the most part. We were a tiny, in 2020, we were a tiny staff, 3.5 people. And everyone but me was fluent in Spanish and English. So when we were helping folks who speak Spanish, it wasn't a problem. But when we're trying to serve individuals who speak Dari and Pashto, that presents a whole new challenge. And because we cannot effectively represent somebody if we cannot speak to them. And so we leaned on Sabina and we said, Sabina, help, how do we get interpreters? And there aren't a ton of them. Masood was one of the interpreters. And so, just being able to build these relationships and go forward, that has been incredible. And that has truly been a gift that I hope that we continue to move forward. But in terms of what we can do to help in particular with the Afghan group, we need an Afghan Adjustment Act, because these folks should not have to go through the asylum process. There should be a direct pathway to citizenship for them, because it is not safe for them to go back. They do have the well-founded fear. So advocating in that regard will help.
What did you call it?
The Afghan Adjustment Act.
Adjustment.
If you know of an organization that is doing the work, and I will tell you, sign up for our newsletter, go to our website, go to Sabina's website, go to the AMAC website, sign up for their newsletter, because they're the ones who are keeping up with the policies. They're the ones who are going to be able to tell you, this is what's happening in this area. One of the resettlement agencies, NICE, reached out to me recently. They have 150 Ukrainians who are going to need legal services. And so now we're trying to figure out how that's going to work. How are we going to do that? And so sign up for the letters, support the organizations that are already doing the work. I mean, I can't be here and not say that. And then, follow on social media, share on social media. It makes a difference, for us to be able to, have the information out there, serve on the boards. One of our board members is here tonight. So that was a surprise. And so, yeah, those are the different ways that I can help. But, we've all been in here doing kind of like the triage work, but we have to have system change. So vote. Think about who you're voting for. So those are my top top recommendations on what to do.
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
Because she talked about the Afghan Adjustment Act, but also and we're working on a problem that we saw, and it's not just with Afghans, but with other refugee population, is that the Tennessee driver's license test is offered only in 5 languages. And Spanish, of course, English, Spanish, but then it's like Japanese and German, the auto dealers, right? And so we are working on campaign to get it expanded into different languages. So again, and Tessa did the best plug for AMEC. We're going to have that, we're working on it and have that as a petition and doing some advocacy work about that. Because a lot of Afghans went to Texas to get their driver's license. And that was easy for the men. Think of all the women who will not be able to make that journey. They have kids. They eventually need a driver's license too, because again, public transportation in Nashville, council member.
Well, thank you. I do think before we go to audience question, I have a question for Norma, but I want to add also that both of them did not say it, but as someone who's chaired a non-for-profit, you need to give money. All the advocacy is good. We need to do that. But the money. So there is a fund for the Welcoming Nashville group with the United Way. I think we'll make sure we send the link. Please do give money. The coalition is using that to be able to support J-Fund in the work that it does, to support some of the organizations that are providing food and materials to the Afghan and to other refugees. And so there's so much to be done with that. That's a good, an easy way to get plugged in. Also get to know your neighbors. Get to know your neighbors. Somebody saying somebody and just smiling is the best thing you can do, because you never know what they're going through that day. And so as a new person, I could run for office in Nashville because I was blessed to meet a lot of people that welcomed me into Nashville. People say, Zofa, you're so nice. I'm like, no, you have to understand that it goes 2 ways. If you're putting out a lot of good and you're nice and you're smiling and nobody reciprocated, you go back into your shell. It's just the way it is. So it takes 2 to be able to have that welcoming feeling. If I put it out, then you give it back, and that's how we do it. And so the best thing you can do for a new person, the best thing you can do is that friendship, is that smile. And when you break it all down, we're all the same. Just mothers, and start talking about children. Oh my God. There we go. That's my friend on there. So that's, I mean, when we start talking about our children, you don't see anything else. And that's a very good way to start. So I wanted to.
Can
yes,
I
ma'am.
add one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Masood talked about education. I talked about education. Sabina mentioned that folks have come here from a variety of careers, and I know that our staff has one of the stories that sticks with me is when our legal director met with a client who they literally left their tea shaking on the table when they, like that was how they left. Norma talked about her education. Right now, if you are an immigrant, if you are a DACA recipient and you're not eligible for federal student loans and you pay the international rate for tuition, so you're paying 3 times the amount of tuition, and that's something that you all can advocate for, that they get in-state tuition. So sorry, that was one.
No, thank you. I'm writing it all down. So before I go to the other question, I just want to ask Masood and Norma. Do you really, I'll start with Masood because you've been here longer, but do you really feel settled? And then Norma, what do you miss most about home?
I'm really sorry. Everything. My family. We never forget that place that we born. That we take habit with the weather of that place. With the society of that place that we lived. And the family that we grew up with them, my sister, my brother, and all my family, my father and mother. Everything I can miss everything. When somebody talk that when I see in the social media or at least one flag, a small flag that I see in some part of the social media or someplace, when I see that, I can't control my emotions because that was that place that I born. I take breath from that air and I grow up on there. Everything that when I see, when I look, everything I missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think, yeah.
It's not easy, you know, as I was saying, leaving things behind, leaving everything behind and missing everything. I worry. I worry because my wife has her immediate family there and goes through some of the exact same emotions as Norma's going through because her family's there. And that's one of the situations that's a little unique about the Afghan neighbors as opposed to some of the others, that the conditions under which they left. She didn't mention it, but a lot of people were just split, right? There was an explosion there in those days where people were being evacuated and people were separated. People were separated from their families, from parents, from siblings, from spouses, and all of those things, which makes it difficult. So there's that aspect of it. You know, I'm here, my kids were born here, and that's what part of what worries me moving forward in terms of being here and trying to get settled is some of the issues that Sabina mentioned, which is why I'm passionate and try to do what I can in that they will always be asked, where are you really from? They will be asked that. And I've got two daughters. They're young, and at some point they'll wear a hijab if they choose to do so, and there will be misconceptions about them. How do you prepare them about that reality, knowing that, look, there are endless possibilities, but there will be, biases against you. Just know it and accept it and work through it. You're going to have to do a lot more and work a lot harder, and to have any, to have some of the same opportunities. So settled, yes, still working on it, but incredibly blessed. And it's, the sense of community that is exhibited by the people that are in this room and all along the path that makes it, that gives everyone optimism and puts a smile on our face and want to help out others as well.
Thank you. At this point, we want to open it up for audience question. Miss Claudia.
Yeah, I got one. All right, Zulfa, first of all, you've done an excellent job, and you are a gift to our community. So thank you for your service, and thank you to all of the panelists who are also incredible treasures as part of our Nashville community. I think Nashville is perceived as a warm and welcoming city internationally. And Mohammed Shukri from the Mayor's Office of New Americans is a great example of, how our city is trying to, embrace our New American community. Can you talk a little bit about the conflict with, if there is one, I think there is, with the state, and, kind of what hindrances does the state of Tennessee put on Nashville's ability to be a more warm and welcoming city for, our New Americans?
Where do we start? Who wants to take that?
I mean, I think we can all speak to different ways. I mean, literally, we had the legislature sue the state so that they wouldn't accept any more refugees. But that was defeated, and our current governor did say, yes, we will accept refugees. I mean, the fact that conversation happened is I don't know what to say, but it's indicative of what kind of legislature we are working with here. Equity in tuition, right? That's something that hasn't passed yet. That's holding back children. And you talk about, let's say, the graduation rates. Well, part of the problem is that there are kids who don't see a future beyond high school. They can't see college because they can't afford it. We're trying to pass this, getting driver's license in different languages. This is something like 10 years ago we were trying to work on. And we were just kept told from the Department of Safety, like, oh, we don't have the funds. What do you mean? You don't have the funds? You have funds for everything else. And so the state has been, a barrier. It definitely has been a barrier. And I think that's where we as a community have to organize and push forward. And I'll let Tessa and Zulfa say more.
One of the things that the state has also done is that it prohibits us from being a sanctuary city. You have to understand that people come in different ways and for different reasons. And so this whole idea of, okay, if you're a refugee, you can stay, but then if you come in another way, then we have to kick you out. As a city, we are prohibited from being a sanctuary city. Somebody reached out to me not too long ago and said, do you want Nashville to be certified as a welcoming city, like go through the process? We are welcoming city, but when I reach to the council office, we have to be very careful how it's defined, because then if the state gets into that, if it looks too much as if we're trying to be a sanctuary city, then we can get in trouble with the state. And so there's a whole lot there. And then when you're also looking at our state, state and how we work with ICE. That's another area where, you know, we had an ICE raid here in Nashville not so long ago in the Kurdish community. And I remember an incident where somebody was picked up that is a US citizen. Sometimes when people get picked up, it doesn't mean that they're all illegal. And by the time you figure out what's happening, they're already gone. And so there's so many things in place. So I think Nashville is welcoming. I can attest to that fact. The coalition that we're talking about, people are always ready to give, people are always ready to step in, people are actually bringing in refugees into their homes. And so I'm so grateful for this oasis in the middle of everything that is Nashville. But that is Nashville. Our state is not, I mean, with the legal, with the laws, with the rhetoric, with the political climate, with everything that is being said, we're not as welcoming, and I mean, and that's the truth. But I hope we continue to do what we need to do as human beings, individually and collectively, to welcome the strangers into our lands.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we're butting our heads up against what the state might be dictating. Again, vote. What if, you know, in this last year, I can't remember what the number is now, but it might have been 6 or 8 anti-immigrant pieces of legislation were introduced. There was a huge victory that was led by Turk for licensing, because up until then, you couldn't be an immigrant and even get a bartender's license. You couldn't be a barber. You couldn't get a professional license. You couldn't be a nurse. So you could have gone to a school in another country and have gone through all of the education, but you can't do it here. So that was one win, and we take that one gratefully.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Judy.
I've been working with an Afghan family through the Jewish Federation has sponsored 2 Afghan families, and that's a 6-month process, but we're beyond 6 months and I'm still working with them. But when you're talking about the driver's licenses, the father of the family took that once a week for 10 weeks. He took that test, the written test, and finally passed it. And he kept telling me, but my friend in Nebraska, yeah, he was his friend in Nebraska and somebody in California, and I kept saying, but this is Tennessee. And the other thing that about Tennessee is the financial support is abysmal. I mean, I really never understood how bad it is. He's a father. There are 4 children and his wife. He's working. His wife can't for certain reasons, and he's not professional. And finding a job that will cover his expenses it's impossible. And I don't know how you approach the state or wherever the funding comes from to increase that. He lost food stamps because he was making $24,000 a year for a family of 6. So, you know, that's
So I don't have an answer, I'm sorry. But, you know, when we talk about the need in 1 year, 2 years, you know, first, 8 months, they get that support from the resettlement agencies. And they talk about, yeah, we're trying to make the client self-sufficient. But, you know, self-sufficient means you're barely there. Anything happens, you fall below. And now, with a lot of families being here a year, we're seeing a lot of new problems, people switching jobs and then not realizing they're losing health insurance and things like that. And it is devastating. But I mean, I think one of the good things about the coalition, our last call, literally we had Metro Action Commission and they were talking about rent relief, and then connecting with one member of our coalition, Brother Salim, who knows everyone, said, oh, that lit a light bulb and said, yeah, I can get it for these some of these families. The Afghan community, it's not so from last let's say last March. The numbers were about 540 Afghans came in through resettlement agencies. So they had those services. Since then, there have been a lot of Afghan families who have moved to Nashville from other cities. So some of them lost benefits. And so now they're coming here, and the resettlement agencies are overwhelmed, busy. They have other clients now, and they're like in line to maybe get some services. So they're the ones also not quite getting the benefits or any services they need. And then another group coming in are people who are maybe crossing the Mexican border and seeking asylum. Again, they have a need, but then they've been told, okay, go to a resettlement agency, put your name in, and when they get to you, then they can probably help you with benefits. And so again, they're suffering. So I'm sorry, I didn't even give an answer.
I want to say that one of the things that I'm so proud of with the coalition is that we have been able to solve some of the small problems. And one of the things that Metro Action Commission actually did is the job fairs, where they're actually talking to employers and said, there are skilled people among these refugees, and so please give them a job. So you all are leaders in your respective organizations. If you're in charge of hiring, she will tell you that they have their papers, they have their work stuff, and so you could hire from that group as well. It goes against this old misconception about maybe we cannot hire them, maybe they won't do a good job. Trust me, immigrants work very hard. We do 120%. So that's something else that you can do. Yes, ma'am. That will be our last question.
A little different subject, but education. The subject is education of the children.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a family with now, we're 3 mentors here. We have a family with 4 children. They just had a baby. The oldest one is 4 now, and we've been trying really hard to get him in preschool. Okay. Went through the application, helped the parents with the application process, went to the enrollment meeting, at Head Start. And the little boy got accepted.
Okay.
So that went pretty fast. He got accepted. He was like the top of the list to start. Well, then they have teacher shortage. So he can't start because they have more than one, she told me, teacher to hire, and they can't find qualified. So he can't go to Head Start, he can't go to Head Start. The other problem was that for that Head Start, they do offer bus service, but they don't pick up at Buffalo Trails where so many live. They pick up at the Walmart nearby. Well, our father is working there. Yeah. And the mother doesn't drive. So I tried reaching a lot of people to try to get him transportation to Walmart, and that fell flat. So for those 2 reasons, he can't go to Head Start. Then there's pre-K at Metro that doesn't offer bus service, so the father would have to drive him there, but the father's working. And then there's the only other option I could think of was a nearby private daycare for preschool, but that takes money.
Yeah.
And even if we could raise the money, he doesn't have a ride.
So let's talk after this. Those are some of the issues that the coalition usually will tackle and bring people and see what we can do, and see if we can make a connection, whether it's with the ride or something. But let's talk. And as you're working with this group, if you're finding things, that's what the coalition is doing. Almost every time, even the registering of school for Head Start, we literally had to bring MMPS and bring MAC and take them to Buffalo Trails to go register them. So that's part of what the coalition is doing. And so if you will meet with Sabina or myself and just let us know, we'll go ahead and we'll take care of that. I see Joari standing on the side. You guys have been very, very patient. I want to thank my panelists. So I saw another quote from Ellen Keller, and she said, "There is no king Who has not had a slave among his ancestors? And there's no slave who has not had a king among his. Think about that. We may be sitting where we are now, privileged, but we don't know the history of the ones before us or even the ones coming after us. This is Nama's story, the Masur's story today. It might as well be yours or your kid. And I think it's very important for all of us to have that empathy, to try to build a good world for each of us, to know that we're connected as human beings. Again, I go back to that quote in the beginning that says, empathy is the act of imaginatively stepping into the shoes of another person, understanding their feelings, and using that understanding to guide your actions. I hope tonight you've heard the story. I hope you understand those feelings. And I hope that you're living tonight thinking about ways that your actions can help guide all of us to a better humanity. Thank you.
Thank you. If you are like me, you are without words. This has been informative. This has been invigorating, and most of all, this has been powerful. So thank you all for helping us to understand how Nashville has become a home away from home for refugees, and how we can, as a city, support resettlement and adjustment. And Norma and Masood, I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, for your vulnerability, because as many of you know, it takes a lot of courage to stand up here in front of people that you don't know and to share your story and to really share that piece. To Sabina, Tessa, and Zulfat, thank you so much for your voices. Thank you for lending your voice to the conversation and helping us to really become more informed on the work of your agencies, but also just your work and your leadership in the community. I want to make sure before we leave today to thank the Women's Fund Board and also all of our friends in the community for joining us for the forum this evening. And a recording of tonight's forum and the forum resource library will be available. It can be found on the Women's Fund website, which is thewomensfund.com. I also encourage you to please take your program with you, as again, it has language and vocabulary in there that we hope that everything that you've learned today, everything that you've heard tonight, that you can walk away and that you can share with others, that you can go back and share with your colleagues, your friends, your neighbors, so that as a community, we can be more informed and that we can do our part in helping each other. I also want to make sure that we invite you and share the information about our Power of the Purse. So we hope that we can see all of the many faces here again on, let me make sure I get the date right, April 12th, 2023. So make sure you put it in your calendar, save it now. But again, if we can give one more round of applause to our amazing panelists. Thank you all, and have an amazing night and be safe getting home. Thank you.